What if the story of a young girl just trying to survive in World War II Germany was told not by a historian or even by her, but by death itself?
It's an incredible hook.
Right. And what if this version of death wasn't this, scary, hooded figure, but a weary, almost philosophical narrator? One who's telling a story that's filled with this surprising warmth and humor and just an overwhelming sadness about how beautiful and fragile being human is.
That is the most provocative entry point you could imagine, and it just grabs you from the first page, and that's exactly what we're diving into today. The Book Thief, Markus Zusak's powerful and unforgettable work of historical fiction. But we're not just going to, revisit the story. We're taking the emotional truth from that book, and we're going to run it through a pretty rigorous lens of some cutting-edge psychological and sociological research from 2024 and 2025.
I love that. I mean, that's the whole mission of the deep dive, right? We're taking the emotional reality of Liesel Meminger's survival, her fight to just exist in Nazi Germany, and we're connecting it directly to what modern science says about trauma, about resilience, and the undeniable power of a story.
It's where art meets science.
Exactly.
Our goal here is to give you, the listener, a shortcut. A way to understand why stories like this one don't just, entertain you. They actually reflect these deep, scientifically observable truths about who we are. We want to pull out the deepest insights and show you the science behind why words can be both terrible tools of destruction and, at the same time, the architects of our own survival.
And we really have to touch on why this book hits so hard, especially now. I mean, you look at the world around us with all the conflict and the uncertainty. The Book Thief feels like this necessary reminder, a reminder of the power of hope, of human connection, and just the fight for what's right, even when the world's in chaos.
It connects to something primal, to these universal truths. It's not just a historical novel about the past. In a way, it's a manual for emotional endurance, for right now. It shows that hope, connection, courage, those are the real enduring elements of resilience.
Yeah.
They're the mechanisms that let a person's spirit survive when the world outside is trying to crush it.
So let's start right where the book starts, with its most, I think, defining element, the narrator.
Death.
It's such a brilliant, almost subversive literary move. I mean, making death the narrator immediately sets this tone of profound but gentle observation. Death isn't rooting for things to end.
No, he's almost lamenting his own job.
He is. He's observing the process, and his focus is always on humanity's capacity for these small, brilliant acts of defiance, even as he knows the end is always coming.
I actually want to pause and challenge that a little bit because it's a serious choice. Doesn't using death as a narrator risk, sanitizing the sheer brutality of that era, the Holocaust? How do you maintain the horror with a narrator who's so philosophical, even whimsical at times? That's a crucial question, and I think the answer is in the detail of his observation. Death doesn't romanticize the violence. In fact, he's constantly expressing this. Weariness. Disgust, even, with human cruelty. He's always pointing out these vibrant, specific details of life. The color of the sky, the sound of an accordion right before he takes a soul. And that contrast, it just sharpens the tragedy. The horror isn't lessened, it's made unbearably intimate.
So we're seeing these fragile, beloved people through the eyes of the one being who knows their end is coming.
And even he wishes it wasn't so soon.
Wow. That observation, that perspective, it translates into this deep emotional investment in the characters.
Yeah.
It elevates the story of one young girl into something universal, a testament to survival. And that girl is Liesel Meminger, the girl who steals words.
She arrives in Multing, which is a fictional town near Munich, and she's already carrying this acute trauma. Her younger brother has just died on the train. She's being displaced, sent to live with the Hubermans right as the Nazi regime is cementing its power.
And her first act of survival it's immediate and so deeply symbolic. She steals the gravedigger's handbook.
From the snow, at her brother's graveside.
A book about burying people, stolen at her brother's own funeral. That single act defines her entire journey.
It absolutely establishes the fundamental pattern. She's not stealing these books for money. She can't even read them yet. It's purely for psychological survival. It's a tangible link to her loss.
Trophies of endurance, I like that. She's fighting the chaos of her grief with the structure of the printed word.
Exactly, and her environment is hostile, politically, emotionally, but her immediate connections become her salvation.
We have to spend some time on these bonds of crisis that anchor the whole story, starting with Hans and Rosa Huberman.
Hans. He's the anchor, the complete antithesis of the violence all around them. The source material calls him the gentle father, and he really just embodies kindness. He does. He finds that stolen book, the Gravedigger's Handbook, and instead of scolding her, he sees the need behind the act. And he starts teaching her to read, painstakingly, using sandpaper and charcoal in the basement.
That act of teaching her to read in that time and place, it's not just about education. It's a revolutionary act in a regime that's all about controlling information and crushing independent thought.
Absolutely. Those lessons in the basement become her safe place, her intellectual heartbeat in all the chaos. He's modeling what real moral courage looks like, small, consistent acts of kindness that, eventually lead him to take these enormous risks. He's the foundation of her psychological security.
He shows her that not all adults are terrifying figures of authority. Some are protectors.
And then there's Rosa Huberman. We can't forget Rosa. She's famous for being so rough, right? Using insults as terms of endearment, but she becomes just as important.
Yeah, she's this perfect example of, hidden resilience. She's gruff. She calls everyone a mensch or a soccer roll.
But underneath that very rough exterior, she is fiercely protective. Her decision to agree to hide Max, despite the immediate fatal risk to her entire family, that confirms her deep moral core.
Right.
So she's modeling a different kind of strength for Liesel, the strength of quiet, absolute dedication and sacrifice.
And then there's Rudy Steiner, the lemon-haired boy, her best friend. Their relationship is just. It's pure, desperate childhood magic in a really dark world. And it's so crucial for her mental health.
Rudy is essential. He provides sense of normalcy. He represents this pure, innocent loyalty. Remember the Jesse Owens incident?
Oh, yeah.
Where he covers himself in charcoal and runs laps because he idolizes a Black American athlete right in the heart of Nazi Germany. That one little act of resistance tells you everything you need to know about his character. His spirit is not broken by the ideology around him.
And that one detail the source material always highlights is constant, innocent requests for a kiss. It's this simple, unfulfilled desire for connection.
Yeah.
And it just stands in such a stark, poignant contrast to the horrors of the war.
It's the necessary counterpoint to all the darkness. Their bond, stealing apples, playing soccer, it allows Liesel these crucial moments of shared joy. And we know, clinically, that those moments are vital for maintaining your mental equilibrium when the world is constantly threatening to fall apart.
And that brings us to the most dangerous, the most defining, and probably the most transformative relationship of all, Max Vandenberg, the Jewish man hidden in their basement.
This is where the survival stories become completely intertwined. Max is basically a ghost, hidden from the world, and Liesel becomes his connection to life. They share their nightmares. Max dreams of running. Liesel dreams of her dead brother.
And they share stories. Max writes her a story, The Standover Man, and he does it on pages from Mein Kampf that he's painted white.
That specific detail painting over Hitler's words to create a new humane narrative, it's just unbelievably powerful.
It's a symbolic act of rebellion.
It is. It's two souls in the deepest state of emotional and physical hiding, forming this unbreakable, silent pact of survival. The risk that comes with his presence elevates their connection beyond just friendship. It's mutual dependence. And it's forged under the constant threat of immediate execution. It is the absolute definition of a bond formed in crisis. And that profound connection leads us right into the central, most powerful theme of the whole narrative: the dual power of language. Terrifying, yet magnificent.
Words as weapons and words as healing mechanisms. The story makes it so clear that language can literally destroy nations and lives. But in the right hands, it can also save individual minds, individual souls.
And the setting, Nazi Germany, gives you the most painful context imaginable for words as destruction. The Nazi regime didn't just use violence. Language was their primary weapon.
Right, the propaganda.
It was systematic. It was designed to dehumanize specific groups of people, to inflame hatred, and to justify mass violence.
It was a conscious effort to control how people thought and to silence any dissent. The words shouted from podiums, the rhetoric in the newspapers, the signs painted everywhere. It created this oppressive environment where the very air felt thick with destructive language. It was poisoning society.
Exactly. And Liesel's journey is her sustained counteroffensive against all that. She is actively using words to heal, to comfort, and most importantly, to preserve her own sanity and the sanity of those around her. The great irony is that a system built on weaponizing language is ultimately countered by one young girl harnessing its power for kindness and for intimacy.
We see these really specific, moving examples of this. The source materials always point to them as these key moments of resilience. Like when the air raids start and all the neighbors are huddled, terrified in the Fiedler's basement, Liesel starts reading aloud.
And that is so much more than just a distraction. It's an act of imposing order on chaos. When you're in a shelter, listening to bombs shake the foundations, reality is completely terrifying and unpredictable. By reading a coherent story, Liesel imposes structure, psychological stability. She's forcing their minds to follow a predictable path, away from the violence above ground.
And of course, her relationship with Max Vandenberg, the story she shares with him, the conversations. She creates a whole world for him in that dark basement.
Max is confined to this tiny, dark space. He's suffering from severe sensory deprivation. And Liesel brings him the outside world. She describes the weather, she tells him what happened that day. She's providing him with crucial intellectual stimulation and emotional connection that, frankly, probably prevents his total psychological collapse. Her use of stories is purely to save her own mental state, processing all that trauma and grief and fear by becoming both a consumer and a creator of narrative.
So the battleground of the entire story is precisely that. It's the destructive power of mass, weaponized rhetoric, versus the saving power of intimate personal narrative. Liesel doesn't just survive. She wins her internal war by choosing to value and absorb and share the words that connect people, not the words that divide them. Okay, so let's unpack this. We've established the literary and emotional depth, but here's where it gets, for me, really fascinating, connecting this deeply emotional historical story to concrete, cutting-edge research from 2024 and 2025. We've got 4 distinct scientific findings that don't just echo Liesel's experience, they scientifically validate her entire survival mechanism.
And this connection between fiction and modern behavioral science is why the book feels so intensely true. It confirms that the human responses to trauma that we see in the book are not just some literary invention. They are demonstrably successful, observable mechanisms of psychological and neurological survival.
Let's start with finding A. It's a 2025 psychology study, and it focuses on trauma and resilience. The core finding is that children who are exposed to war or displacement often develop heightened empathy, stronger emotional memory, and profound resilience.
This is such a critical insight, and Liesel's entire trajectory is the perfect clinical case study. Her initial trauma, her brother's death, the displacement, it didn't just lead to her withdrawing. It led to active empathy. She became acutely attuned to the suffering of other people because she recognized the specific frequencies of pain.
So how does that, look practically in the story?
Well, look at her immediate protective stance toward Max. Max arrives terrified, sick, vulnerable. And Liesel understands his hidden fear and isolation instantly. Not through some theory, but through shared emotional experience. You could call it trauma-informed compassion. It's a higher level of empathy that compels her to take those high-risk actions to protect him, to comfort him, even risking Rosa's anger or the violence of the regime.
That's way beyond simple kindness. It's a really profound, complex understanding of suffering.
Precisely. And this is linked to the stronger emotional memory part of the research. Trauma burns events into your memory. But for resilient people like Liesel, this heightened memory fuels active engagement, not paralyzing fear. Her later actions, reading in the shelter, her unwavering loyalty to Rudy, they all demonstrate the deep resilience that the 2025 study identified as a common outcome for children who successfully process that early life shock. She transforms her pain into connection.
Okay, so moving on to finding B. This is 2024 research on the power of reading and storytelling. And this is striking. It shows that engaging with narratives during emotional distress demonstrably increases psychological stability, emotional intelligence, hope, and something they call cognitive resilience.
We should probably define that term for you. What is cognitive resilience? It's not just being mentally tough, it's the brain's ability to maintain structured thought, to focus, and to predict, all while surrounded by chaos. Think of your brain as trying to run complex software while the environment is constantly sending error messages.
And the structured nature of a story, of reading, it fights those error messages.
Exactly. When the world is fundamentally unstable, when the sirens go off, when Max is critically ill, the act of engaging with a structured, coherent narrative provides a necessary cognitive anchor. This scientifically validates Liesel's entire compulsion to steal books. She isn't stealing for material gain. She is engaging in a psychological exercise that actively stabilizes her mental architecture. Reading is literally a mechanism for retaining sanity and hope.
So when she's down in that basement with Hans, just learning to read, while the chaos of the world outside is escalating, she's actually training her brain to filter noise and impose order.
Absolutely. And the increased emotional intelligence mentioned in that research, that's what allows her to process these highly complex feelings about guilt and fear and love, which are all just magnified by her environment. Books give her the vocabulary and the framework to understand and organize that emotional onslaught of the war. It makes her exponentially more resilient. She's practicing structure in her mind so that when the external world loses all structure, she doesn't.
Wow. Okay, Finding C is a 2025 social psychology study on human bonds in crisis. This one is incredibly compelling. It states that relationships formed under acute crisis situations become some of the strongest human connections ever recorded.
This is a powerful validation of the entire Huberman household dynamic. I mean, think about the intense pressure cooker environment they maintained for years. They were living in a constant existential threat. The shared, immediate risk of hiding Max in act, punishable by immediate execution for Hans, Rosa, and Liesel, creates an unparalleled environment for bond formation.
They're operating at peak vulnerability and trust 24/7. There's no room for superficiality or hidden motives in those connections.
None at all. They're relying on each other for their fundamental survival and their moral support. The communal fear of the air raids, the daily small acts of profound kindness, these circumstances act like superglue on human relationships. Hans's bond with Liesel, Liesel's bond with Max, Rudy's unwavering loyalty, these are not casual friendships. They're purified by shared suffering and mutual dependence, which makes them scientifically exceptionally strong and enduring connections.
I think about the moment Hans offers bread to a passing line of Jewish prisoners. That one act immediately puts his life, his family's life at risk. That extreme vulnerability, that shared moment of moral conviction, it must have just solidified the bonds inside that house immensely.
It does, but it also reveals the strength of Rosa, who supports Hans through his whipping and that terrifying waiting period that follows. It highlights that the crisis doesn't just bond the relationships between the adults and the children. It strengthens the foundational parental relationship as well. The crisis forces them to clarify their moral code, and that clarity strengthens the whole system.
Okay, finally, Finding D 2024 insights from something called narrative identity theory. This basically posits that we understand ourselves through stories, and that narrative itself is a scientifically supported healing mechanism.
This is the meta-connection that brings the whole book together. Liesel doesn't just read stories, she internalizes them, absorbs them, and eventually she writes her own story, The Book Thief, which is the book that death preserves. Narrative identity theory suggests that our sense of self is fundamentally the story we tell ourselves about who we are, what happened to us, and where we're going.
So by moving from being a passive recipient of trauma, a girl who had things stolen from her family, her childhood, to becoming the active author of her own experience, a girl who stole words and wrote her own life, she achieves mastery over it.
She achieves agency. She takes these horrific random events of her life, her brother's death, the adoption, the war, Rudy's death, and she actively structures them into a coherent, meaningful narrative. This active structuring is the healing mechanism. The research confirms that the process of articulating and sequencing chaotic events turns passive suffering into active memory and agency. She reclaims control. She's no longer just a victim of Nazi Germany, she is the narrator of her own psychological and emotional destiny.
And we see that physically in the book, right? She's literally writing her life story in the basement when the final bombing raid hits. The act of writing is what saves her physically because she wasn't in the main part of the house with everyone else.
Yes.
It's just an incredible merger of the literal and the psychological.
It's the ultimate validation of the theory. The narrative doesn't just heal her mind, it saves her body. The moment she is spared is the moment she is engaged in the most profound act of self-creation and emotional articulation. She is proving, in that one terrifying moment, that the story she is creating is more powerful than the external destruction trying to end it.
So, what does this all mean? We've connected Liesel's emotional journey, her survival, to these robust, modern scientific findings. Let's try to distill the core truths that the story leaves us with, the simple yet really profound themes that resonate so powerfully long after you've closed the book.
I think the primary hard-won theme is the enduring presence of humanity in dark times. The source material is relentless in showing you the horror of the regime, but it constantly foregrounds the fact that even amidst that overwhelming darkness, love, kindness, and individual acts of courage didn't just survive. They became magnified. They shone brighter against the oppression.
It forces you, as the reader, into this uncomfortable but essential task of looking for those small, flickering lights of human decency, rather than just getting consumed by the darkness. Hans risking his life for Max, or Rosa bringing Liesel a bowl of pea soup when she thinks nobody is looking. These are moral statements that require immense bravery.
And this leads right into the theme of grief and healing. We see this duality that pain can either completely shatter a person, or if it's processed correctly, it can transform them into a storyteller. And Liesel is shattered certainly by the loss of her biological family, and then of course by the loss of the Hubermans and Rudy. But her process of turning those personal tragedies into a narrative, which culminates in her own written story, that is the ultimate healing arc. It's agency through articulation, exactly as narrative identity theory predicted.
I'm fascinated by the relationship with Rudy in this context. It's easy to just see him as the faithful friend, but he really embodies this theme of friendship and sacrifice. His willingness to risk everything for Liesel, his unwavering support, it's all defined by immense personal risk in a world where even friendship was suspect.
And Rudy's own small acts of resistance, like the Jesse Owens moment, or his willingness to steal food with Liesel just to survive, are so crucial to the psychological balance of the story. They show how young people, even when they're being indoctrinated by the system around them, can find their own internal moral compass. The loyalty between Liesel and Rudy, Liesel and Max, these bonds were forged under extreme pressure, and they're life-defining because they required absolute mutual dependence.
When you think back on the book, the emotional imprint it leaves is just so deep and universal. The source material shares several insights that really stay with you. First and foremost is the power of simple, almost mundane acts of kindness.
In a setting where kindness is dangerous and therefore monumental, those small gestures, Hans teaching Liesel to read, the sharing of a single story, Rosa's hidden love, they prove that morality survives even under a dictatorship. It teaches you that heroism isn't always a grand battle. Sometimes it's just enduring and remaining decent against all odds.
And the realization that words are more than just language. They are, as we've seen, scientifically proven survival tools. They're the instruments Liesel used to dismantle her trauma, maintain her stability, and rebuild her sense of self.
It forces a deeper appreciation for human connection, too. I mean, when you read about Max and Liesel clinging to each other in that basement, sharing simple fears and simple stories, you understand, viscerally, the necessity of connection when isolation is the biggest threat.
And most starkly, just feeling that profound contrast between innocence and brutality. You see the simple, pure childhood magic of Rudy and Liesel set against the backdrop of unimaginable Nazi violence. This contrast doesn't just heighten the tragedy, it heightens the beauty of their resilience.
Which leads to that final, necessary emotional teaching moment. Recognizing that beauty can exist, and often does exist, within profound tragedy. The beauty of the bonds, the quiet beauty of Hans's patience, the beauty of the language Liesel learns to wield. This complexity is precisely why the story resonates so much. It teaches us that light and dark can coexist, and the darkness doesn't have to win.
So we've taken this literary masterpiece and we've validated its deepest emotional and psychological truths through the context of cutting-edge social science. Let's bring it back to you, the listener. Why should you pick up or revisit this book now, armed with this deeper understanding?
Because the book doesn't just entertain you. It fundamentally transforms the way you view crisis and survival. It offers this unique and incredibly intimate view of resilience, framed through a child's eyes, which is often the most honest and unfiltered perspective on human suffering and hope.
And it helps you truly understand the human side of war and loss in its rawest, most personal form. It goes beyond the historical headlines and dates. It puts a face to the cost of destructive rhetoric and the power of private resistance.
The ultimate synthesis of our deep dive, the core truth that we have scientifically and narratively confirmed, is this. Even when the world is falling apart, even when organized destruction is happening on a global scale, words, love, and humanity are the resources that never deplete. They are the keys to psychological endurance.
And that leads to our final, provocative thought for you to reflect on. Something that builds directly on that heightened empathy and emotional memory we discussed in the research section. Sometimes, the ones who suffer the most, the Liesel Memingers of the world, become the ones who feel the deepest and, perhaps, understand life most profoundly.
It's a profound consequence of survival. Those who are forced to confront trauma and loss develop that heightened emotional attunement. They become experts in the delicate balance of suffering and joy. Their deep capacity for pain, once it's processed through narrative and connection, translates into an equally deep capacity for love, for storytelling, and for empathy. It's the ultimate, painful, yet necessary gift of human resilience.
A truly powerful truth to leave us with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into The Book Thief, where we confirm that the power of narrative is not just magic, it is scientifically proven survival.